light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. I have always been an extremely creative person. I suppose that's not a surprise to anyone who's watched the show. Even back before kindergarten. And I've always been a very deep thinker. I sometimes joke with people, but it really was true. I was questioning the meaning of life by the time I was 10, reading psychology books during my teens. I suppose if I had been born in New York City instead of a small Germanic farming community in Wisconsin, that I would have been steered into various sort of advanced education programs and maybe been recognized as a prodigy of sorts. I never really thought of myself that way until just a couple years ago, but I was thinking back and it seemed to me, if I was questioning the meaning of life by the time I was 10 and getting into all these other things, that, maybe I really was somehow mentally ahead. Maybe I was born with a hyperactive mind or something. Because even when I go to bed at night, it seems like the brain just never shuts off. It's just always running, and usually at a deep level. But I'm hoping that's helpful in the creation of all of these shows to give people inspiring things to think about, new perspectives, and so forth. But it gave me a rather serious demeanor, I guess, and I've occasionally been accused of being too serious. I think I have a good sense of humor, but outwardly it looks like a very dry sense of humor, because a lot of times I'll recognize something amusing and absurd, but I won't necessarily laugh about it, but it's like I'm kind of grinning a little and laughing on the inside, because I do find it very amusing. I just don't express it the same way. But so I had different people who were misinterpreting my outside appearance, saying that I was too serious, or that I needed to lighten up, or I needed to laugh more, or something. And so a lot of times I was trying to figure out what were they really talking about. Is it that I have less joy than other people? I don't think so. My life has certainly had a lot of struggles, and a lot of my early years in public school and in Catholic school even, I was picked on by bullies a lot. So there, and my family, like most families in America, I suppose, had its dysfunctions. In my case, it was a family that was an extreme of non-communication. In the interest of not having arguments, we weren't allowed to talk about anything that really mattered. Anything that had two sides to it immediately rewarded to drop the subject, because we didn't want an argument. There's nothing worse than an argument, apparently, but maybe that's one of the reasons why it's so important to me that people have the freedom to disagree, but that we find ways to talk about it in a civil, mutually respectful manner, and to talk about the ideas and not attack the person, and to understand that a person's ideas and a person are two separate things. That just because the person says, I believe thus and so, we can talk about the belief without saying there's anything unintelligent or bad about the person. Because each of us has different beliefs at different points in our lives, and my beliefs have changed and evolved in different ways over the years. But I kept trying to figure out, what exactly do we mean by joy anyway? When people would say they wish me more joy in my life, and well, I think I have plenty, but I think I experience it in a different way. And perhaps everybody experiences joy in a different way. There was a particular professor during my college years who, when it came to play auditions, had the infamous emotional nursery rhymes exercise within every audition for whatever play the college was doing, where you would be told to say a nursery rhyme, any nursery rhyme, as if you were angry, as if you were sad, as if you were, whatever emotion. And of course, that's really not helpful, because as an actor, I know that anger looks different according to what you're angry at. And sadness looks different according to what the source of the sadness is. And happiness over one thing is not the same as happiness over a different thing. And so really, to do a good audition, you need to have a context, a specific sort of, if you're happy about getting a present, that's one way of looking happy. If you're happy about seeing a good friend you haven't seen in a very long time, that looks very different. They're both happy, but there's a spectrum of different ways to look happy. So in a similar way, in trying to figure out what is happiness, what is joy, what is any of these emotions, to recognize that each requires a context, and that you get stuck on one emotion, and that's exactly how you experience it, and that's the only way you'll experience it from now until whenever. That you will only know one kind of happiness, and you will only know one kind of sadness. And so I try to come to a deeper understanding of what is joy, what is it we're really seeking, and how does it tie into this spectrum of relationships that fill my life. Relationships to a moment, to an experience, to a circumstance, to a challenge. How can I be joyful? How can I be joyful and sad at the same time? Because very often humans have the ability to be aware of two different things simultaneously that provoke two different, completely contrasting emotions at the same time. And it is sometimes difficult for others to understand how you can be feeling two emotions at once. For example, happiness at finishing high school and graduating and realizing you will not have to go to high school ever again. And a little bit of sadness and fear because you really don't know where to go next. And in retrospect, I find it totally laughable that even in 7th and 8th grade, I would have administrators and teachers asking, "So what do you want to be when you grow up?" As if at age 17 or 16 I had any idea. Because of course one may choose what one thinks one will be or what one wants to be, but there are actually, in my understanding, very few people who wind up becoming what they say they want to be when they're in 7th and 8th grade. Life, well, in another saying I'm fond of passing around of late is that life pitches curveballs and we adapt. Things happen that we didn't expect to happen, and they shape us. Going from my high school of 10,000 or my high school of 1,000 in a town of 10,000. There was 236 students in my graduating class, but going from a town of 10,000 to a city of 10 million, because the year after I finished high school, I was at an acting school in New York City, and the difference between the two was so radical and so extreme, it was difficult to really come to terms with the fact that they were both simultaneously existing realities, and that what was real in my hometown was absolutely real, and what was real in New York City was absolutely real, and the two could not have been more different. And how that took my understanding of what the world is and stretched it out and gave it dimensions and possibilities that I'd never imagined before. And in that, beginning my journey back to a deeper knowledge of myself, because there's so much that growing up in a small town had repressed, and if not overtly repressed, had given no opportunity to. There was no way for my creativity to develop with some of the limitations that were there. There were all sorts of things I couldn't learn there because the resources to learn those things weren't there. And through college, wrestling with how other people express things and well, how I express things. And does it matter? Is it really a problem that I'm different? For whom is it a problem? Well, it's not a problem within me, but it's a problem between me and with anyone else with whom I'm talking. Because I would run into their expectations and their definitions, and I found them all interesting, but the more people with whom I spoke, the more definitions I had for how things should be. And then perhaps one of the wonderful gifts of my college education was that for 3 semesters I had a roommate who was from mainland China. And we got to talk about how he understood the world and how I understood the world, and comparing and contrasting things for 3 semesters. And a fascinating alternative look at the world and how societies function and people function and decisions are made and communities function. And getting into, many years later, into a master's program, and once again being challenged with where's the joy, because my joy didn't look like other people's joy. And so in attempting to answer all of that, I composed a song that I simply called Joy. Laughter can tell a simple truth or be made out of a lie. And a smile can hide tremendous pain the talking can deny. And it's when I laugh and when I fill every second with a word that a well-trained heart can hear a cry for a deeper voice to be heard. Joy in being, joy in singing, joy in dancing, joy in pain. For the Spirit within this moment can never, no, never be contained. Happiness is a dancing breeze, a fluttering butterfly. But when summer's gone, and autumn too, it's but a memory of days gone by. But go on, dig a little deeper now within the struggles of each day, and you will find that there's more to you than what other people say. Joy in being, joy in singing, joy in dancing, joy in pain. For the Spirit within this moment can never, no, never be contained. So what is joy but those moments when life wins out after all? And what is joy but the power to see the victory others can't recall? And what is joy but the faith I have at the end of every day, that what matters most when all is said and done is what time can't take away. Joy in being, joy in singing, joy in dancing, joy in pain. For the Spirit within this moment can never, no, never be contained. For the Spirit within this moment can never, no, never be contained. I suppose it's challenging to a lot of people to think of there being joy and pain. I guess when I wrote that line in particular, it seemed very important to include it. To recognize that joy is not dependent upon external experience, that joy is something about valuing the fundamental energy of life, that joy is about being glad to be who I am, even if being who I am is occasionally a painful thing to be. Not because it's inherently painful, but because it places me at odds with the world around me, such that sometimes I get attacked simply for being who and what I am, because it doesn't fit in with other people's expectations. And so sometimes they lash out at me, and whatever else they want, they don't want me there. Which reminds me of a book that a friend gave me quite a number of years ago, written by the actor Charles Grodin, which is simply entitled, the title of the book was, It Would Be So Nice If You Weren't Here, because he actually had someone say that to him at one time, and I probably had people say similar things at some point. I guess I take it as God's vote that I belong, that I am here. In the same way that one of my very good friends, who was a transgender woman, in finding herself to be such, I am trying to understand that and come to terms with it and integrate it with my faith in a very transcendent, divine, and yet immanent and present God. The only thing that made sense to me was to accept that the fact that she existed was God's message, if you will, that she needed to exist, that there was something that the rest of us needed to understand by her existence that we wouldn't learn any other way. I think it's unfortunate how often and how extremely humanity is so dense and difficult to educate that lessons of life have to be hidden within virtually everything around us, and sometimes we still don't get it. There is so much to learn simply about being who we are, and to accept that if a person exists, to consider for a moment that maybe it was God's intention that that person exists, and that person exists in the way that that person exists, that God meant for there to be transgender people and gay people and lesbian people and even intersex people who are born with combinations of male and female characteristics. Why would God create someone like that? I suppose we should listen closely and look closely and find out. Clearly this is too extraordinary for it to be meaningless. This is too unusual. This is too specific for it to be a pure accident. I could never think of a person as being an accident. I think every person is a message from the realm of spirit, from God, from the universe, if you will, about the spectrum of possibilities, about what we need to learn, about where humanity needs to go next in its societal and psychological and emotional evolution. And in that, the joy is not from the circumstances on the outside. The joy is from the acknowledgement, the recognition, the acceptance that I am exactly who and what I was intended to be. That how I express that to the world is my task, but that in being who and what I am, I mean, it's a difficult thing to say, and I certainly would never say it in reference to him, but I had a friend who was paraplegic say to me once that as he looked at his life, he decided that really he was going to wind up paraplegic. That was simply the way his life was meant to unfold. And he wasn't saying that in any depressed or cynical sort of mindset, but rather that he was coming to appreciate the ways that being paraplegic had totally shaped his life experience, his perception, his understanding of relationships, and his expectations about the future. But that with all those things, he had developed this incredible ability to cope with all the challenges that kind of made it just another temporary characteristic. That somehow his spirit, his memories, his understanding of life and of relationships was somehow being shaped, constructively shaped, by the fact that he's now paraplegic. He once told me about the accident, and it was on 2 or 3 different things that were not usual, all happening in close juxtaposition, and after which he wound up being paraplegic. And of course, life changed, and everyone thought that it would change for him more than it did. But he knew what he loved, and he went right back to doing what he loved. And he simply found adaptive ways to do it. And in that sense, I would describe him as a joyful person, but I don't know if he's always aware of how joyful he is. You know, that the joy is about finding a way of believing in life and of having faith, even when it makes no sense to do so, and perhaps especially when it makes no sense to do so. That in the midst of that pain of becoming paraplegic, he can still find joy in still being alive. He can still find joy in still doing what he wants to do and what he loves doing. I told him once we were on the phone, I said, you know, in the bigger picture of humanity and the way people, so many people, are so mismatched with their professions and careers, you're really one of the lucky ones because you're doing what you love and you're making a living at it. And I don't know if anyone had said that to him before, but he thought a moment and just said, yeah, you're absolutely right. And you know, I mentioned various people I know who are doing jobs they hate. And in some ways, I think retirement is the reward for doing something you hate for 30 years. If we were doing what we love our whole lives long, and having that inner joy of being who and what we are, and having the aptitudes and interests and aspirations that we do, maybe the circumstances wouldn't matter quite so much, as long as we could keep doing what we love. And whether it hurt or whether it felt good, as long as we were doing what we loved, how could that not be joy? So in the song, as I said, it's understanding that the joy is there in the being, and that whatever is happening within that beingness, whatever is happening within that life experience, can be encompassed by that inner joy, rather than the inner joy being eclipsed and overshadowed by what's happening on the outside. And that's the joy I aspire to continue to pursue. I personally have no aspirations to retire. I simply want to find ways to make a living at what I love and do it to my last breath. And I've often joked I wanted to live to be 100 and go skiing to celebrate. So it could be that the last picture of me in the newspaper will be Sister Who at 100 years old careening down a ski slope. And grinning from ear to ear the whole way. It would be just too wonderful. And probably one of the more appropriate ways to wind up what has already been a horrendously creative life, and I'm not even halfway through at this point. So, if it's not the smile on my face, rest assured there's joy inside. And all the more joy if we can walk the journeys of life together. And I thank you for being with me for the last half hour as I share these thoughts and this song with you. I hope it's been helpful to you. And I wish you great blessings in your experience of joy as well. Thank you for watching.